Okay, there's a bunch of stuff that I want to get to here, specifically as it relates to the eclipse windows that surround each of these total solar eclipses that will cross over Carbondale, Illinois. The first one in 2017 and then the second one on April 8th, 2024, which is tomorrow as I record this. And Carbondale is of particular interest as it relates to one thing that I recently found out, which is that Carbondale, Illinois is going to become sort of an abortion mecca for the region. I made a community post about this, but I think it deserves a little more attention here, where you can see a headline like, "How one quiet Illinois college town became the symbol of abortion rights in America." For those of you who are not familiar with American politics and our judicial system, the Supreme Court recently overturned a prior ruling that will allow states to choose their own abortion policy. Accordingly, there are going to be a bunch of states, just the way things have played out around Illinois, that are going to do that. Meaning, people who want to get an abortion who live in those states are going to be kind of flooding into southern Illinois to have that procedure done. And that's so fascinating to me in the context of this great American eclipse that crosses in that spot in southern Illinois, also known as Little Egypt, because no matter what justification you use for that procedure known as abortion, any way you try to spin it, it is terminating a human life inside of a mother's womb. For those of you who are not aware of what exactly that procedure entails, you kind of have to suck it up and go find the videos that show it, because once you see what it actually is, when you see the term abortion written down in a news story or you hear somebody say it, you have that image in your mind of what it actually is. And that image was in my mind when I saw this story. And I'm thinking, wait a second, what are the odds that from one perspective, there is going to be a flood of child blood sacrifice going on in this very specific area where these two eclipses make an X over the United States of America, in the context of the fact that we know these eclipses have been infused with symbolism relating to the ritual destruction of the United States of America, seen primarily through Donald Trump's role as the eclipse moonchild in this ritual. What are the odds that this blood sacrifice is going to be taking place increasingly in that area? I don't have the answer to that. It's just something that has to be pointed out here. This is another article. Planned Parenthood opens Carbondale Clinic amid influx of out-of-state patients seeking abortions. A new abortion clinic opened in Carbondale Tuesday, the physical manifestation of years of preparation by Planned Parenthood of Illinois for the post-Roe world that was realized in June 2022 with the U.S. Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. Anyways, let's get back into the April 8th eclipse window here. On March 1st, 2024, Dune Part 2 was released, and it has this Messiah Holy War theme woven throughout the whole movie. And I don't even remember how many scenes focused on the sun and eclipses in various different ways. Sun's rising, sun setting, eclipsing. It was all over the film in the context of the Messiah being born plot. Which obviously is no coincidence considering what is going on in the Middle East as it relates to all of this stuff going on. But I have one image here from Dune Part 2 that was really fascinating to me, where it showed eclipse imagery, but it was 3 different bodies sort of coming together in the way that they show it in 3-body problem. In other words, this is a 3-body eclipse, and in the context of 3-body problem being a potential metaphor, for the black hole that is your pupil as it relates to the other two bodies of the eye, and how the plot of Three-Body Problem surrounds the idea of these three celestial bodies being in orbit with each other, but eventually spinning out of control, gravitationally speaking, which results in the end of the civilization. And as I went into in that Three-Body Problem video, you could view this as a metaphor for the three bodies in your eye and how this propaganda is designed to keep it in orbit, gravitationally speaking. Their propaganda fuses the orbit together in that way. It controls it. And more broadly, it then makes contact with you through that wormhole, black hole that is your eye. A quantum leap, as it were. Dune Part 2 is pretty much showing you the path that you, the viewer, are on. You are the character in the very beginning in Part 1, and by the end of Part 2, they have turned you into that version of him via their propaganda. They have made you believe to the point where you will follow it into the holy war that they will produce all around you and script into the news. Anyway, I don't want to turn this into a Dune 2 review because the movies are not important in that way. They're only important in terms of how it's serving the larger propaganda that is being beamed into our eyes through these screens. There is no value in these movies otherwise, no matter what anyone else tries to tell you along those lines. Like it's some kind of art designed to enlighten you, as some circles refer to it as, which is just objectively ridiculous at this point. But anyway, March 21st, 2024, Three-Body Problem and Roadhouse are simultaneously released. Then the next day, March 22nd, 2024, there's the Crocus Tenet terrorist attack in Russia, and simultaneously Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is released on that same day, and Ghostbusters has all of that Statue of Liberty resonance, which you can find going back to Ghostbusters Part 2, where they actually get in the Statue of Liberty and charge it energetically, and then it gets up and starts moving, and they walk the Statue of Liberty into New York City, which then obviously connects to the lightning bolt that struck the Statue of Liberty and those images that I went into in the last video. But we'll get further into that as we go here. What I wanted to note in this video in particular is how the Economist covers are playing into this whole thing. You can really find a lot of symbolic relevance to what is on that cover as it relates to the events that we see transpire in the world, in a way that is much deeper than the surface level as it is portrayed. One of these examples is an Economist cover from the magazine that was introducing The World Ahead 2024. Now, for those of you who remember the video I did a while ago that focused on this particular edition of the magazine, you will know that this is the one where they had the image of Donald Trump's head eclipsing the Earth. And they had the language in this magazine talking about why they chose that image of Donald Trump, stating something along the lines of, hey, no one has ever eclipsed the narrative like Donald Trump eclipses 2024. Obviously, no accident that that was chosen, but this was also imagery from that same Introducing the World Ahead magazine. And there's all kinds of imagery here that relates to what happened on 3/22 in Russia. First of all, clearly this is Putin and Zelensky on opposite sides here. And this is Donald Trump's head with a question mark next to Putin because they have associated those two together. You have this hourglass in the shape of an 8, remembering the analemmas as it relates to the sun and the moon, time and Donald Trump, 88 Donnie Darko. And the time in the hourglass, as it is portrayed, is filtering down into this cube that is portraying a total solar eclipse here, which then is connected to what look like pieces of paper that are all stacked on top of each other in this cube. Those of you who've been doing this for a long time know all about the Saturn cube stuff and the black cubes that are all over the world along those lines, and how Saturn is associated with time and the Grim Reaper and death and that whole thing that is associated with Saturn, because Saturn has that hexagonal storm on its north pole, at least according to the images that are provided to us. There's no way for us to know if that's actually true or not, obviously. But if you recall the Crocus terrorist attack, the building was named after the crocus flower, which, as you can see here, is very clearly a cube. You can see the 6-pointed star here that the inside of this flower makes, which just so happened to be the place where this terrorist attack transpired during the Russian-Ukrainian war, right before the April 8th, 2024 eclipse, and about 3 days before a lunar eclipse that is in the same window. In other words, they're showing you this Sun and Moon 8 analemma imagery in the context of time running out, a total solar eclipse, Putin, Zelensky, Russia, Ukraine, and a cube. Remembering that this was released in November of 2023. And if you go read about what they say with a cover like this, yeah, sure, there's surface level explanations for what's going on here, but if you look deeper, this is an eyeball as well. The pupil is the cube here, or the black hole, and this is the iris. So they're depicting an eye here in a broader sense, at the same time that they show you the eye and the screen as it relates to brains being plugged into technology. And then at the same time, you have this currency exchange imagery down here, and you have this imagery that looks like containers on a ship. Going back to the Francis Scott Key incident, Donald Trump currency exchange, the Francis Scott Key bridge collapse, the Crocus terrorist attack cube, and then just in general, the propaganda as it is infused into our minds, which are increasingly fusing with technology, which relates to the out-of-time theme. Consciousness perceiving reality in a way where it's the end of the old world. Out of time, leave the world behind. The neuroplastic brain rearranging into something else that perceives reality differently. This is the Videodrome idea, going all the way back to that movie and what they were telling you through that, where the television screen would literally come out and touch you and suck you into it, to the point where the overall message of the film eventually is there's no difference between the two, your mind and the screen. 2001: A Space Odyssey, the monolith at ground zero. So it's like they're showing you so much of what is going to transpire at the same time that this magazine is kind of showing you how it's on your eye, right? This is all the stuff on your iris that is eventually sucked into the event horizon that is the black hole. So March 26th, 2024, right after that lunar eclipse on March 25th into March 26th, at 1:28 a.m., 88 minutes after midnight, there is the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore after it is hit by the container ship named Dali. Now, as I went into in that video, the Dali flies a Singapore flag, which has Eclipse, Washington, D.C. imagery on it. Here you have the Eclipse imagery and the Pentagon imagery. In the context of the Star-Spangled Banner national anthem bridge collapsing right next to Washington, D.C., the ship is carrying this flag on it when it hits the bridge. An eclipse and the Pentagon. The Pentagon being synonymous with America. And September 11th. But also, Singapore's official mascot is the merlion, which is white and has the head of a lion with the body of a fish, literally a white sea lion. And this is a picture of the merlion. You can see it's got the head of the lion here and then this fish body, and it even looks like it's on a boat. Which is incredible given the fact that Leave the World Behind had the White Lion cargo ship that crashed onto the beach, that they made a whole big scene out of. What are the odds that this actual real container ship that crashed into the Baltimore Key Bridge was carrying a Singapore flag with Eclipse residents and Pentagon residents at the same time that it has a white sea lion residence? What are the odds of that? Very slim. That's a coincidence, I think. And also, I couldn't help but notice that it's a fountain, which kind of ties it back into the Matthew Perry ritual, where there's those scenes of Matthew Perry in the fountain at the opening of the Friends show, where he is shown spitting out water through his mouth in the fountain, right? And obviously, Leave the World Behind has that Friends theme throughout it, released in its world premiere 3 days before Matthew Perry's death in a hot tub, water, which occurred on a lunar eclipse. And the Baltimore bridge collapse likewise happened in conjunction with a lunar eclipse. I know I've gone over this Matthew Perry stuff and a lot of these connections, what feels like 100 times now, but it's hard not to go right back into it when you are discussing new parts of it. So my apologies if I'm repeating myself in a way that is annoying you somehow, but I just have to do it when I'm getting into all of this in a different way. In any event, at the same time, the last episode of Friends aired 2 days after a total lunar eclipse blood moon, which is the same type of moon that Donald Trump was born under during a total lunar eclipse, meaning that episode of Friends is the common thread that is woven throughout the entire plot of Leave the World Behind. For that reason, it is pointing towards the idea that Donald Trump is the common thread woven throughout this whole ritual that is the Great American Eclipse, or the destruction of the National Anthem Bridge. Where you have Matthew Perry in a fountain spitting out water connected to a movie that shows a White Lion container ship, where there is an actual white lion as the mascot of the flag that is on the ship that crashed into the bridge. And it's a half lion, half fish on a boat, right? I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's clearly intentional in the way that it was scripted in the subconscious dark matter realm. Also, along those lines, in Three Body Problem, which was released 1 day before 322 and just a few days before the Baltimore Bridge collapse, that series also shows a container ship with a giant satellite dish on it, evoking the Contact theme, and Magic Beach, and the White Rabbit, as it related to that scene in Three Body Problem. It shows a container ship being destroyed by invisible dark matter nanotechnology as it then collapses onto the shore. In a way very similar to how that other container ship in Leave the World Behind, the White Lion, crashes into the shore. The Magic Beach scene from Contact that involves the same thing, the sphere, the black hole, the wormhole that your consciousness travels through, making contact with their programming. which then controls your mind in a subconscious, sublime fashion. And then, in addition to Leave the World Behind, White Lion, Three-Body Problem, Container Ship Destruction, as it relates to Singapore and the Dali, on the same day, March 21st, 2024, Roadhouse is released, which stars Jake Gyllenhaal or Donnie Darko, and the plot places all of the characters in the Florida Keys, where almost every scene, in some way, shape, or form, involves bridges, or boats, or water, or some combination of the three. Bridges, boats, and waters are all over the movie, and indeed, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, or Donnie Darko, lives on a boat just called The Boat. And there is a scene when Donnie Darko, Donald Trump, goes over a bridge and a car follows him over the bridge into the water. Putting that image in your mind of an accident on a bridge causing cars to fall in the water that relates to Donald Trump, and that is seen clearly through the Francis Scott Key Bridge being the bridge that was destroyed, which relates to Donald Trump through the Great American Eclipse, or the ritual destruction of America, meaning the destruction of the national anthem in this instance. Those events take place in the Florida Keys, the Francis Scott Key Bridge. On the same day that Three-Body Problem shows the container ship with a giant contact satellite dish on it being destroyed by invisible dark matter, quote-unquote, nanotechnology, which again is alluding to Donald Trump as the invisible dark matter subconscious technology that infuses our minds with the ritual that they place on top of all of this stuff, that they layer into it. Now, this is where it gets pretty wild. There are a bunch of Economist magazine covers that point towards this event in Baltimore. First, this is from November 2023, Too Good to Be True, the contradiction at the heart of the world economy, where you have this bridge that has clearly been cut in half, it's missing the rest of it, and you have this scene where it's too good to be true that this woman is walking on water. Or at least that's how it looks with the way that this is portrayed as kind of waves. But it's hard not to think of walking on water when you see this kind of image, given the biblical connection to that idea and what they typically show you along these lines. So this Economist cover is released in November of 2023, at the same time that there's this old Salvador Dali painting, remembering, of course, that this ship that crashed into the bridge was the Dali, right? That was its name, the Dali. And you have this Salvador Dali painting that the Economist then mimics with the headline, Too Good to Be True, in the context of the Great American Eclipse ritual involving the destruction of the American dream. It's too good to be true. The broken bridge and the dream. Do you see how that is directly playing off of each other there? As I said here, Salvador Dali painting The Broken Bridge and the Dream mirrors November 2023 Economist cover, Too Good to Be True, in reference to the death of the American dream, which also alludes to many other Economist covers. This is another one showing the container ships, like the one that hit the Baltimore Bridge, with the title Zero Sum. There's probably all kinds of stuff here with the way the ships are positioned that I'm going to miss and not cover, other than the obvious fact that it's an E or an M, depending on how you want to look at it. Or maybe even a Z. I mean, those shapes are all very similar. And then there's the obvious portal imagery, where you have this whirlpool that mimics how they portray stargates in all of the films. which gets at the idea of the zero-sum game that's being played here through this propaganda, and how they're trying to take you through their version of the Stargate, as represented by Donald Trump and the quantum leap. Then you have this costly and dangerous cover from August of 2022, where they actually show one of these container ships that looks just like the Dali, with all the containers on it, as a bridge over water. Oh, and it really does kind of evoke the parting of the sea, as it were, walking on water. The broken bridge and the dream. Too good to be true. Costly and dangerous, right? Exactly what the Dali ship would be. A literal container ship as a bridge over water. And then, in the context of the fact that the actual destruction of the Baltimore Key Bridge took place on March 26th, just a few days before the lightning hit the Statue of Liberty, you have this Economist cover from September of 2022, where the Statue of Liberty is a bridge. And the title is The Disunited States of America. Do you see that? How it's a literal bridge here. In the context of the Disunited States of America and how that relates to the destruction of the national anthem via the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The broken bridge and the dream. The dream that is the American dream disunited now. And then there's this one from The Economist in April 2021, Message in a Bottleneck, where they show the container ship in a bottle as if, hey, this is a message in a bottle. We are sending you a message here about what one of these container ships will eventually do, in the context of all of our other covers showing the container ships. Do you see what's going on here? It's a message in a bottle. I'll send an SOS. What happens when a ship wrecks? It's an SOS. I hope that someone gets my message in a bottle, the song by Sting. And then, we're not done here. There's an Economist cover from October 2023, Our Free Markets History, and they show the containers from a container ship making the triumphant arches here. This one is unbelievable. I mean, it really sums up the whole thing. These are triumphal arches. The Roman triumphal arch was used to commemorate victorious generals or significant public events. There's a lot of nuance to the arches I was reading about, where some of them meant this and some of them meant that, but the general idea is this is an arch of triumph. And those of you who have seen Donnie Darko will remember that he actually wears a Triumph shirt relating to the idea of Donald Trump triumphing. It's a message on multiple levels, right? Donald Trump is going to triumph eventually as the 11-9-16 president, as the 9/11 twin. But also he is our version of a triumphant arch that we have personified and constructed in physical reality itself. We personified the 9/11-2001 ritual into a person. It's a triumphant arch. And in the context of that ritual, the Great American Eclipse, you have these container ship triumphant arches with the title Our Free Markets History. Obviously, America is associated with the free market and capitalism, so they're putting the doubt here as it relates to the future of free markets in the context of triumphant arches put together by containers that are put on container ships, one of which, called the Dali, the broken bridge, and the dream, crashes into the national anthem bridge and destroys it, symbolically destroying the American dream. The broken bridge and the dream. This stuff's unbelievable. They're telling you here, Our Free Markets History, the broken bridge and the dream. And this is their triumphant arch that it relates to as a part of the larger Great American Eclipse ritual. As I say here, the containers are making the arch in reference to the Dali and Baltimore Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse, or collapse of the national anthem, or collapse of the Twin Towers, i.e. the Great American Eclipse, with USA being associated with free markets. And I bring up the Twin Towers there because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, they constructed a triumph arch that encapsulated the Twin Towers, showing you in advance, yes, this is going to be our triumph, this ritual destruction of these two towers as it relates to the larger ritual destruction of America. Here's our triumphant arch along those lines. So I hope you see how the Twin Towers in this arch is the exact same thing as these shipping containers being made into an arch, given what they showed you when that ship with these containers crashed into the national anthem bridge. Unbelievable stuff, right? So right out in the open. This bridge collapse took place in Baltimore, which will coincidentally see 88% of the Great American Eclipse, with the longest duration at 3:21 p.m. Again, the familiar themes of 88, Sun, Moon, Donnie Darko, the Analemmas, Baltimore and Washington, D.C., the ritual destruction of America. But then, on top of all of that, this is something that I couldn't believe, and a commenter pointed out to me, thank you very much, that Mountain Dew will release the Star-Spangled Splash flavor in June of 2024. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but it's just unbelievable. The Star-Spangled Splash. What did that bridge do? The Star-Spangled Banner Bridge, the national anthem bridge, made a splash in the water when it collapsed. Star-Spangled Splash is a Mountain Dew flavor planning to be released for a limited time alongside Liberty Chill and Freedom Fusion in June 2024 during the summer. Liberty Chill. Remember the Ghostbusters title, Frozen Empire, released 3/22 in the same window of time. Liberty Chill equals Frozen Empire. And then Freedom Fusion. They are fusing freedom with something else. Our free markets history. And then, incidentally, there was another flavor named Maui Burst as a part of this whole campaign. And obviously that's a bit coincidental considering what happened in Maui in the context of a potential directed energy weapon being used, or a DEW, D-E-W. So you have a Mountain Dew flavor called Maui Burst. And then you have this fire that is said to be wildfires that destroyed a big portion of Maui. I don't know what happened there. It really could have been a wildfire, but we have to ask the question, what caused it? In the context of a Star-Spangled Splash flavor and what happened with the Baltimore Bridge, and a flavor called Maui Burst, given what happened there. We have to ask the question at least. So then on April 3rd, 2024, there is the storm in New York City that leads overnight into April 4th, 2024, the day before the earthquake on April 5th, 2024, where lightning strikes the Statue of Liberty. In all of those scenes that I showed in the prior video, where the actual lightning strike inexplicably has this resonance to the Great American Eclipse through Little Egypt and Cairo, Illinois, where there's this fractal between where the Great American Eclipse will cross Little Egypt and the Nile River splitting at Cairo, Egypt. Everyone on the internet that's trying to debunk this kind of thing is saying the usual, oh, it's a metal building that gets struck by lightning 600 times a year. Of course this happened. Why are you making a big deal out of it? And it's like, because of all of the other stuff that I've gone into so far and in this video as well. That's why it carries a little bit extra weight. Yeah, ordinarily, it's just another lightning strike on this huge copper metal object. Standing high in the sky, right? It's a good conductor, yes, of course, but in the context of everything else, this is quite unbelievable. especially when we get further into Donald Trump and the golf course and the earthquake. But going back to Ghostbusters as well, where they literally get in the Statue of Liberty and walk it into the city, and the way that these lightning bolts are very pink and look like the guns that they use, you have that frozen empire idea and the currency exchange idea that Donald Trump represents. As they showed you when he announced his run for president in 2015, he walks past the currency exchange. Because he has all of this resonance with Back to the Future, the lightning bolt that hits the clock tower at 10:04 when they reach 88 miles an hour to go through the wormhole, to create the portal, to travel back in time. Sun and Moon, Analemma, 88, Donnie Darko. The Moonchild. The portal to a new reality. The portal to a different dimension. Which is why the technology aspect and the literal currency aspect of it in terms of money is also transforming into a digital form during this point in time. Because of what Donald Trump represents in relationship to time itself. Solar time versus mechanical time. A metaphorical difference between the two. They are taking us out of time. It's the end of the world. Leave the world behind. He goes down the golden escalator and the tower falls, metaphorically. The sign that falls down. He's the falling tower. The triumph arch that overlooks the falling tower, which is the United States of America itself. So after that lightning strike, you have the 4.8 magnitude earthquake at 10:23 a.m. felt in New York City with an epicenter near Lebanon and White House Station, New Jersey. A 4.8 magnitude 3 days before the 4.8 total solar eclipse that has been infused into Donald Trump as the Moonchild eclipse baby and everything that he has been programmed to represent in the subconscious programming. Then there is a 4.0 aftershock at 5:59 p.m. near Gladstone, New Jersey, but there are conflicting reports now saying it was a 3.8 or a 3.7. So I don't know what it actually is officially, but all of the news was running with the idea that it was a 4.0 originally. And if you add 4.0 to 4.8, you get 8.8. In the context of the lightning strike on the Statue of Liberty, you have 8.8 or 88 worth of earthquakes shaking the foundation of the ground hours later on a golf course that used to be owned by the guy who created the DeLorean. I could not believe that when I found that out. It's unbelievable. John Z. DeLorean, the creator of the DeLorean that is depicted as a time machine in Back to the Future, owned that land before Donald Trump bought it. Donald Trump turned DeLorean's house into the clubhouse of the golf course. So it's really Donald Trump's Bedminster DeLorean golf club. And it was only a few miles away from the epicenter of this earthquake, right after a lightning strike of the Statue of Liberty, keeping in mind that Donnie Darko wakes up on a golf course in the context of an eclipse and the end of the world, quote unquote, adding up to 88. You have an 8.8 total earthquake in that area where his golf course is right there. It was where the DeLorean maker lived before him, and a lightning bolt strikes the Statue of Liberty hours before in an earthquake that adds up to 8.8 or 88. Lightning bolt strikes the clock tower when they're going 88 miles per hour to send them into a different time, to open the portal to a different dimension, however you want to view it. The gateway. The black hole, the wormhole, a quantum leap in consciousness from one place to another. You could take it any way you want, but this is just unbelievable stuff. Adding on to the Donnie Darko thing, however, you have this unbelievable Economist cover from April 1st to April 7th, 2017. Remember, this earthquake took place on April 5th, 2024. Okay. The exact same time period in 2017, which is the prior year for a total solar eclipse within the Great American Eclipse pattern. You have this cover of The Economist, the Trump presidency so far, where you have the sand trap evoking the idea of the event horizon and a wormhole or black hole, a sinkhole, the sandworms from Dune, which are also an eye, that create the spice that's the most valuable thing in the whole Dune universe, that they're all fighting over. All of this going on right next to the White House. Donald Trump Golf Club next to a White House, April 1st to April 7th, 2017, in the context of an earthquake that hits April 5th, 2024, right next to Trump's golf course in New Jersey. That is also right next to White House Station. If you look at the map, Trump National Golf Club, Bedminster, 6.5 miles away from White House Station, and probably equally far away from Bridgewater, New Jersey. So you have White House Station and the Trump golf course and Bridgewater. All of these events coalescing together in one map of an allegedly natural 4.8 earthquake 3 days before 4/8/24. What do I even say after that? In any event, I'll just keep going, okay? Trump's Bedminster Golf Club held a live golf event in July 2022 where they actually brought in a replica DeLorean. Let's repeat that. A DeLorean was actually at the Trump golf course. This is the article that goes over John Z. DeLorean and the whole transfer of the land over time, a step back in time at Trump National Bedminster. And then this is the article, why is there a DeLorean time machine styled from Back to the Future at Live Golf's event at Trump Bedminster? Well, we know the real reason why it's there. I'm sure they would say a completely different reason, relating to the fact that it's John DeLorean's old house. But we know the real reason it's there as it relates to the 9/11/11/9 ritual that was programmed into Back to the Future and Donnie Darko and now Leave the World Behind. And I'm sure many other movies in related ways. But those are the three main talismans, as it were. In addition to the fact that it was John DeLorean's land before Trump bought it and made the golf courses, they actually brought the DeLorean there physically. And that really represents that idea I was getting at about how 9/11/2001, the event, and all of that subconscious programming that was put into the dark matter collective subconscious mind leading up to that event to make it have the impact that it was designed to have. After all of that, they bring it into physical reality more so than just one event. They personify it into a human being via Donald Trump as the twin of 9/11 that can then destroy on a level that one event isn't capable of. You can only get so much out of one event, as they found out with 9/11. Yes, it created the war on terror, but eventually they had to pivot to something else when that narrative no longer worked. Naturally, they switched it to domestic terrorism, and they had that all planned out to fit within Donald Trump when they personified him as the 9/11 ritual embodied in physical reality. They did the same thing here, taking that ritual from Back to the Future as it related to 9/11/2001, and they physically brought it into existence by bringing the DeLorean back to the golf course that Donald Trump owned at that time. So Trump's DeLorean Bedminster Golf Course was at the epicenter of the earthquake on 4/5/24, less than 48 hours after the Statue of Liberty torch is struck by lightning. And obviously, as the currency exchange president, all of this stuff was infused into Donald Trump from the beginning, and we'll kind of come back around to this lightning strike hitting the clock tower at 10:04 p.m. through an analysis of the August 21st, 2017 eclipse window, where you have the Economist starting the year 2017 with this image of Donald Trump as George Washington. And it's getting at that idea via 1776 allusions that Donald Trump will be the end of the American dream. He will be the great American eclipse. He will destroy what was created in 1776. That's how they set the scene for his first presidency. And then from there, they start the process of creating him as the domestic terrorist, conspiracy theorist president. This is from February 2017, an insurgent in the White House, where they have Donald Trump here throwing a Molotov cocktail-looking device, but also see how this is Donald Trump as the Statue of Liberty. He's holding the torch here, except in his version of it, in the currency exchange, that is Donald Trump, the lightning bolt hitting the Statue of Liberty in the context of Back to the Future, 10:04, 88 miles per hour, 1488, Civil War. That's what Donald Trump is. That's his version of the Statue of Liberty. An insurgent or terrorist in the White House. That's always how it was designed, to personify him as the twin of 9/11. And in that context, he's a domestic terrorist. He's the twin of the other terrorist event. Then in March of 2017, The Economist has a Quantum Leaps cover, which goes back to the Donald Trump Quantum Leap episode and the creation of his tower or his monolith that overlooks the UN. This magazine is right after this one. An insurgent in the White House leads to a quantum leap in a variety of different ways. A quantum leap in our perception of what America is and what it will be in the future, at the same time that all of the other stuff is going on relating to our perception of time in the context of technology and the internet and our fusion, biologically speaking, with technology itself. The World Wide Web catching us in the Ethernet, creating an artificial version of the ether that exists all around us in actual real reality. And obviously at some point, the creation of AI is presumed to be a quantum leap that will relate in a kind of contact that will alter us forever in a way that cannot be undone. Along those lines, remember, August 4th, 2017, Randy Newman releases Dark Matter album with a Putin song, and the Dark Tower film about a gate to a parallel world is released on the same day. In other words, Donald Trump is the black hole quantum leap personified, the gatekeeper, as it were. Then on August 10th to 11th, 2017, you have the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, an alleged white nationalist domestic terrorist event, which begins the narrative shift from the war on terror to domestic terrorism. And there's the famous photo of the protesters with torches. And these torches look a lot like that torch they depicted Donald Trump having, the Molotov cocktail, the insurgent in the White House. Now you have the insurgents in the country mirroring that in a subconscious way. At the same time that you have this relating to the Statue of Liberty torch that is struck by lightning in the lead up to the April 8th total solar eclipse. That is a part of this great American eclipse ritual. 9/11-2001 created a sort of new parallel reality or tangent universe in this context that was closed or ended when the personified twin of 9/11, Donald Trump, was elected president on 11/9/16, and the narrative shifted to domestic terrorism, a precursor to control the pro-nationalist sentiment that would emerge during the push towards the new multicultural nation states within the global multipolar world government. They knew the larger agenda would produce the backlash against it, and so they created their own controlled opposition via Donald Trump and other leaders all across the world who represent the pro-nationalist sentiment, and they simultaneously turned their controlled opposition leaders symbolically into terrorists that are against democracy, that are racists, white nationalists, evil people that are a danger to democracy. And in that way, you simultaneously are able to censor what is placed on the internet by associating your controlled assets with actual terror events in the real world that need to be stopped. Hey, we can't allow this speech on the internet anymore. It could lead to more Trumps. Look what happened the last time. On and on it goes as it relates to the eventual goal of curtailing free speech. By associating all of this stuff, all of this controlled opposition with hate speech, and then using hate speech as a weapon of mass destruction to destroy any type of objection to what is taking place in reality, in a way that it will never gain traction in the mainstream news. Obviously, then this connects back to what I was going into in the prior video about how Back to the Future has the scene where the lightning strikes the clock tower in 1955 and it breaks the clock at 10:04 p.m., which is 14, when the DeLorean hits 88 miles per hour, exactly at that moment to open the portal to time travel back to the future, which evokes the 1488, associating Trump with Hitler and white nationalists, and how he is playing that role as the white nationalist, conspiracy theorist, domestic terrorist. That's his role, at least in part, as the personification or twin of 9/11. He is the currency exchange. Again, the moonchild, water, currency, lightning bolt, energy, all of that stuff is fluidly flowing through what they have made Donald Trump to be, the caricature that's been painted in the mind. It is all of those things. He's a talisman along those lines. He draws you in, has a gravitational pull. Just a few days after the Charlottesville incident, The Economist plays right into this as planned and has a cover with Donald Trump and a megaphone, but the megaphone is a KKK white hat, giving you the impression that they want you to have, yes, that's what Donald Trump really is. Don't you see? He's just a megaphone for white nationalists. 1488, which is why they then had him intentionally do that ad on Facebook 88 times with the 14 words that started the first sentence. 10:04 p.m., 88 miles per hour. Civil War, 1488. The Confederate flag is an X. Little Egypt has a 618 area code. The Civil War started in 1861, 1.618. The lightning bolt strikes the metaphorical clock tower that is America, and it's out of time. Leave that world behind. Then on October 1st, 2017, there was the Las Vegas shooting at the Harvest Music Festival. 58 people died on the day of the shooting, which was later adjusted on the 3-year anniversary to 60 based on 2 other shooting complication deaths that followed. The 2024 Super Bowl, number 58, the same amount of people that died originally reported, played in Las Vegas 58 days before 4/8/24. Featuring the Chiefs and the 49ers, remembering that the 49ers were in the Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens when the clock stopped at 3:22 in the third quarter, and The Dark Knight Rises has the terrorist attack scene with the Raven stall that kicks it off. The 3:22 stall that kicked off that whole sequence, which ends in the detonation of a nuclear device. And then subsequently shows bridges collapsing all around the city that cuts off Gotham, just like that bridge collapse in Baltimore The same city that the Ravens are in, who were in that Super Bowl, is cut off. The port is cut off by that bridge collapse. The Star Spangled Banner National Anthem bridge collapse. And there's the kid who's singing the national anthem before the kickoff in that scene in The Dark Knight Rises. Donald Trump, I am Batman. And then the whole thing, I won't do it again, going into the Matthew Perry Batman connection. But it's all there, right? The Crocus City Hall has a Las Vegas building in the complex. The original report set the death toll at 137, later adjusted to 144. Again, I don't know which number you want to go with, the one that the news reports the most initially, or the later correction that's officially correct. I tend to lean towards what the media shows everyone in the immediate aftermath, because that's really what they're trying to push into the mind in terms of the rest of the subconscious programming. It just so happens that Three Body Problem, which was released a day prior, features a Civilization 137 that is destroyed by the extreme cold of the chaotic era. This civilization had advanced to the Warring States period before succumbing. Apparently there's a lot to the number 137, but this has gone on for a while, so I'm not going to get into that now. You can check that out on your own. There's a bunch of articles about it. On September 29, 2023, the Las Vegas Sphere opens, or the symbolic black hole, on a super full harvest moon, evoking the Harvest Music Festival shooting. The October 7th, 2023 terrorist attack in Israel at a music festival was known as the Supernova Sukkot Gathering, produced by the Tribe of Nova. It was the Israeli edition of Universo Paralelo, a psytrance festival started 23 years prior in Brazil. This appears very similar to Israel's 9/11/2001, a literal parallel universe event that created a reality where it would be justified for Gaza to be completely wiped off the map, in the same way that 9/11/2001 justified United States expansion into the Middle East. What are the odds that the event that kicked this off was the Israeli edition of a parallel universe festival? That's a psytrance. Do you see the symbolic language there? A supernova. Another Economist cover. It could happen with a mushroom cloud on it. Relating to all this nuclear programming that's all throughout the Nolan Civil War stuff, the 28 Days Later, the Rage virus, Alex Garland, Civil War, the film, the whole thing has a nuclear undertone. Speaking of which, somebody pointed out to me in the comments that Donald Trump was born at 10:54 a.m. on June 14th, 1946, and the United States has conducted exactly 10:54 nuclear tests. What are the odds of that in terms of an association between Donald Trump and nuclear energy? Atom bombs. Again, I hope this is just metaphorical, but hard to ignore here. Especially considering the fact that Baltimore, in the sum of all fears, is the place where the nuclear bomb is smuggled into the country and eventually detonates. Do you see the symbolic weight of that? The Key Bridge collapse was the symbolic bringing in of the nuclear bomb into the script through Baltimore. Speaking of the nuclear stuff, I mean, you could view this as well as the crater that the nuclear bomb leaves when it's exploded. At the same time, that it's everything I went into already. The sand wormhole, Dune 2, the Messiah, as it relates to Trump's role in creating that, in terms of the larger agenda in the Middle East, and the Holy War, the Christian nationalist programming that's increasingly being put out there as it relates to Trump, associating all the other stuff I mentioned already, plus, oh, those are all religious fundamentalists. Those are the people who talk about Jesus. They're out of their minds. The epicenter of the earthquake, 8.8, Trump Golf Course, White House Station, Bridgewater, currency exchange, the Great Reset, the flood, the broken bridge and the dream, the collapse of the national anthem, the collapse of the American dream. As it is all working on the three-body problem that is us, and our inevitable resistance to this agenda when we likewise have the access to the information that the internet provides. At the same time that it is altering our brains and taking us out of time, we are learning about it, and it's a three-body problem. Donald Trump is the lightning bolt that struck America at 10:04 p.m., 88 miles per hour. He opens the portal, the quantum leap, the quantum jump. Donnie Darko, 88, the Eclipse, Moonchild. Your black hole pupil being eclipsed by their propaganda and subconscious programming, leading you to think things that are not true, which is the point of all of this. That's what it's doing. The Triumph Arch, or Trump. The Triumph Arch, that is the personified Trump, metaphorically, over the Twin Towers. Or in this case, the Statue of Liberty here, as it exemplifies what America means and is in relationship to the dream. The containers from the Dali that make up the Triumph Arch here. Sort of in a circle with the sun in relationship to it, evoking ideas like Stonehenge and other rituals along those lines. When it is being played out, the Francis Scott Key collapse in the context of a larger solar eclipse ritual.